Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and what's next. It's a show that asks questions and peels back the layers of our average everyday experience and goes beyond scratching the surface. We interview people doing incredible things who are making a difference around the globe. Join me as we listen in and get one step closer to understanding that big ideas shared create collaboration. Collaboration can inspire community, and communities create social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. So my next interview is with Dr. David Suzuki. He has been the host of The Nature of Things for at least 41 years, and he's going to talk about that 60th year anniversary of The Nature of Things on CBC. Check out the season premiere. It's called Rebellion, and you're going to see why it's so rebellious when you sit down and you click play. Coming soon to a digital theater near you. David and I had a great time. We chatted about, well, without a doubt, we chatted about the reality of climate change. We got into TV as a way of informing people. Why David got into this business of television in the first place, because he wanted to raise our level of understanding about science. He talks a great deal about kind of this fine line between despair and hope. I've referred to myself before as a hopeful cynic, and not sure if David would refer to himself that way, but yeah, because depending on the day you wake up, how you wake up, and the news you read, we talk about the priority of politics and how we're hampered by what actually is politically possible. David actually goes very deep, I think, and says, as environmentalists, we've fundamentally failed. And how did we get here? And that's what really comes out in this film. And you'll see protest, you'll see people coming together. I mean, the establishing shot in this episode, the season premiere, is really quite remarkable. How many people are coming together to push back. We talk about how the economy has become the dominant narrative, and what climatology is really all about, and how kids see some of these things and have this ability to discover these unknowns, I guess you could say, well, they already know it. It's not that they discover it in a matter of minutes, but they already know it. I think it was Einstein who said that children know more about physics at 5 than most scientists actually do. We talk about why so much of this might be beyond human control, and what are we willing to do? How far are we willing to take it in the name of rebellion, of protest, of speaking out against the way things are, and hoping and aspiring towards something better. So stay tuned. Don't touch that dial. Coming right up, an interview. It was a real thrill and a real pleasure to have David on the show. It's 60th year anniversary. How amazing and remarkable is that? And a big round of digital applause for David Suzuki for 41 years with the show. And don't forget, you can learn more about what I'm doing at davidpecklive.com, speaking and writing, and you can get a copy of Real Change is Incremental there. And don't forget too, face2facelive.ca. That's where most of these interviews are hosted. You can find them, on your favorite player, iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, SoundCloud, wherever it is you listen to podcasts, you can find us there. And please, if you enjoy what you're hearing, please leave us a review. A thumbs up on YouTube would be brilliant. A little review, a few stars, and a comment or two would be genius. The more we can mediate the show, the better. And don't forget, we've got over 500 now, 535 published interviews on face-to-face-live.ca. And if you want to advertise with us, you can do that too. We've started to reach out. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. We only send that out about 5 or 6 times a year. And there you go. We've got tons of great guests coming up. But right now, wherever you are, at the gym, out for a walk, driving home from work, settle in and join me as I step into it a little bit with Dr. David Suzuki talking about the climate and the new season of The Nature of Things and the episode Rebellion. Well, welcome to Face to Face. We are joined by a super special guest here with us today. We have Dr. David Suzuki here to talk about, to talk about a whole lot of things. David, welcome to Face to Face. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. So Rebellion, 60th season of The Nature of Things, which is just mind-boggling. I mean, can you give us a reflection or a thought or two just on that alone?
Well,
The conversations you've had for these many years now.
the thing is that in the media, which is so intent on celebrating, oh, this season's brand new films, and a series like this that is 60 years old, people go, what the hell, is a nature of things still on air? Like, what's going on?
Right.
Yeah. We're seeing as this kind of aged thing that is an anachronism on television. But I keep saying, look, this is survival of the fittest.
Mm,
For a series like this to have survived this long, we must be the cream of the cream. Like, this is a top of the heap. I'm very, very proud of the fact that this series has been able to stay on in prime time in Canada during this whole period. In the three major American networks never had a serious science series in prime time in that whole time. You know,
yeah.
PBS has run a number of shows, but PBS audience is a very tiny elite audience. It's not the same as ABC, NBC, or CBS. And I think it's to the CBC's credit that they kept this series on air all of these years. And we've never been more important
Mm,
than we are today. I think that's the rebellion. I've been blown away by it. It's really to the credit of Mark Starowitz, who's put this together, that it's just so energetic and so relevant to today's issues. That's why the Canadians should celebrate the nature of things in its longevity.
I think it's remarkable too, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I think you've 55 books and 15 of them, which is a huge number for kids. I love how you've sort of crossed over. Is that the fair way to put it? Into every generation. When I mentioned to my son, who's 15, I was interviewing you later today. His no joke, his face lit up. He said, "Wow, oh, that's good. That's great." Just the fact that my 15-year-old, that you are a part of in this show and the issues that you've been dealing with are a part of our culture and the psyche is a remarkable thing.
I'm honored by that. I'm delighted. And when you think about it, why would this funny-looking Japanese uh, man, especially an old man now, and I think it's not me, it's the resonance of the
Mm.
issues that we've raised, and I'd like to feel that if I've been able to do it in a way that's exciting to young people, then I'm very, very proud of that. But I think it's the importance of the issues that we've raised. And again, I come back to the nature of things. It's a venerable institution. It started way before I got involved. I'm in my 41st year as host. Um,
Wow.
but that it established itself, and I think it touched people, especially with the nature film work that we've done, and it's what gives David Attenborough the
Mm.
longevity he's had. He touched people. Where we've kind of taken a different path is that we've always been outspoken in terms of the negative impacts that humans were having on the natural world.
You say at the beginning of the film, there's a great establishing shot of the crowds in the streets, and it just gives you a sense for the magnitude and the community that's developed in this. As somebody says, talks about later, I think it's one of the scientists talks about conscientious protection. You say you've seen many protests in your day, but not like this.
Yeah.
Why is it so different?
Well, I think it's because of the reality of climate change now. You have to be, I don't know what rock you've hidden under if you're a climate denier. It's real because it's happening. It's crystal clear. And that's what gives the power to her message. Why should I go to school if I don't have a future? I
Mm.
listen to scientists, and they're telling me the way we're going means that I won't have a future. And she's right. And now you really have to have a vested interest in fossil fuels or something to deny the reality of what she's saying.
That's interesting that you say that, because I did want to talk to you about this idea. The idea of the hoax, the climate hoax, comes up. We talk in the film, Fox News and different outlets, that the hysteria around the what they would call, I guess, bad science, I suppose. This is a big hoax. How do you, after so many years, a scientist and having traveled the world and in so many different cultures and so on, how do you have a conversation with someone or do you even,
No, I
who's
don't.
who's a denier? Like,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, how do you win that argument, David?
I can't, and it's it's all tied into. I'm shocked at the anti-vaxxer
Mm,
movement. Vaccines were one of the greatest discoveries and treatments that humans have ever developed. It's an amazing technology, and it's an amazing use of science. And to deny that is just astonishing to me. I began my career in 1962 when I did a series of. I had no intention of going into television, but
right. Interesting.
I began with a show on genetics, and the producer loved it, and I ended up doing 8 on a local Edmonton CBC channel. And back then, I thought, whoa, television is a powerful way of informing people.
Mm,
And science is a really important part of how people should be making decisions. So I went into television seriously to try to raise the level of understanding of people about science, because I felt the more informed they are, the better decisions they'll make in their lives. So we come to a time when in a cell phone, you can have access to more information than people have ever had in
mm,
human history. You can access the United States Library of Congress through your cell phone. So we've now got all this information, and the opposite of what I thought would happen is
mm,
happening. People don't have to change their minds because you just churn through the internet and look at websites until you find something that confirms everything you already believed, right? You want to
right.
believe the earth was made in 7 days? There are hundreds of websites telling you that. You want to believe that UFOs brought aliens here that mated with women? There are websites. You want to believe the earth is flat? You want to believe in that climate change is a hoax? It's all out there. And people come to me and they say, look, I found this website that said, and he's a PhD, and he says that global warming is an absolute hoax and bullshit, and this is how Trump can justify his lack of attention to COVID, because he's got a doctor there that is a total loony, and he can cite this authority. So this is the thing that is shocking to me, is that it's not just information alone. People have got to say, where's the information coming from?
Mm.
Who's paying for this? What is the authority of these guys that have PhDs or MDs? We don't do that. We just look for a website and boom, we believe it.
Yeah, affirm, as you say, affirm our belief system.
Exactly. And that is really scary.
It is really scary. I mean, I think this is a beautiful, I mean, there's so much to talk about. And by the way, congratulations on 60th year and 40, was it 42 years, did you say? 40,
41
1960, 41st year. Congrats. Rebellion's wonderful. I mean, I've seen many episodes of the nature of things over the years, but they're very engaging for a variety of reasons. And I think there's a pace to it, which I think is kind of a metaphor really for what's happening.
Well, that's to Mark Starwitz's credit,
Right.
so he put together a wonderful film.
I couldn't help but think of Howard Beale from Network, and I hope if my listeners are willing to go back and watch an older film, they'll go back if they haven't seen Network. Are you mad as hell?
Well, I'm torn between a number of feelings, frustrated, but mainly I flit between despair
Mm,
and hope. I stopped a journalist short the other day when he did this interview, and at the end he said, "Well, I've really changed the way I see the world because I have this young baby." And I said, "Your baby, the way we're going, is not going to live a full life."
mm,
And his jaw dropped when he realized, that what the future holds is very, very grim.
mm,
And the frustration to me is, you take someone like Justin was such a relief after 10 years of Harper and Harper denial. Uh, he said Canada was back, went to Paris, signed the agreement, and we all celebrated. And then 2 years later, he bought a pipeline. And you go, well, what the hell? You just signed this agreement, and we've got to get off oil, and you're increasing the output from the tar sands, and you're paying money that should have been going into buses and public transit and all that stuff. Like, what the hell? And you get this. Clearly, it was a political decision to try to tell Alberta, look, we're not all against Alberta. But the most contrived justification was we have to accelerate or increase the amount of pollution from the tar sands, the dirtiest oil in the world, in order to afford to get the taxes to pay to reduce our emissions. Now, you tell me how that makes any sense at all. It's crazy.
Yeah, circular madness.
Yeah, and that's the frustration and the despair that I feel.
You talked very early on, which I thought was really interesting and wonderful, but very connected to what you just said. But that sense of anger and hope, and I loved. I think it was Gail Bradbrook who talked about hopium. I haven't heard that before. It was wonderful.
Yeah, Gail is great. She's a character. She's got a PhD, and
yep.
Yeah, she's great.
Is Gail the one that got up on the door and was hammering the glass?
Yes.
Oh, David, I gotta say, one of my favorite moments in the film. So many, but when she's sort of with her UK kind of accent, turns out it was a rather expensive piece of glass. I just
yes.
It's so beautiful and so human. Scientist first or storyteller first?
Well, I'm a scientist by training, and that suffuses everything I do. And if I have any talent, I hope it's to try to transform what I know in science into something that's compelling, interesting, and relevant to the viewer. And that's a great deal of that is the success of the Nature of Things unit. It's a lot of people that have been able to do that. So, the ultimate storyteller to me is Wade Davis, who is, he's just a great storyteller.
Well, and I think, what's so interesting to me about this episode in particular, I mean, here we've got all these stories of these young people basically saying, how could you let this happen? How is it possible that we ever wound up here? And it's rooted very much in human experience, and you would like to think that we're all going to be high on hopium in the very near future, but it seems like we've got so far to go. And you talk about, you ask the very real question: is the momentum going to fade? You bring your daughter into the picture, who was way ahead of her time, clearly. Can you talk a little bit about that? How we bought in. We want to get out there as well. We want to sign the petitions. We want to divest ourselves, let's say, of fossil fuels and our mutual funds. I mean, how do we? I don't know. How do we stay hopeful, David?
Well, there have been movements in the past. Certainly Severn, my daughter, was caught up in that movement at the time she gave her speech in Rio. But and I look back to 1988 when 300 scientists and politicians met in Toronto, and at that time it was opened by Brian Mulroney, the Prime Minister of Canada. He was followed by Gro Harlem Brundtland, the Prime Minister of Norway, and they were followed by James Hansen, who was the first climatologist to say in Congress, human activity, human burning of fossil fuels is causing the planet to warm up. And it was all there. At the end of the conference, the delegates released a press release that said, human beings are performing an uncontrolled experiment on the only home we have. That global warming represents a threat to human survival, second only to nuclear war, and called for a 20% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in 15 years. There we had it. The science was in, politicians were there, the declaration was made that this is a target to aim for, and we didn't do it. That is the the tragedy of our time, that we had a moment to achieve it. Study after study showed that the target was not only achievable, that we would save tens of billions of dollars, but it required an investment up front
Mm,
of several tens of billions of dollars.
right.
So politically, it made no sense. Even though the end result was achievable, human health would be improved, we would save in Canada a net over $100 billion. It made no sense for any politician to say, sorry, folks, we've got to commit several $billion now for the next 10 years. We've got to commit this money, and maybe we'll achieve that target. But the politicians today, at that time, knew they wouldn't be in office in 15
Right.
years to take credit for it. So it made no political sense to take a shit kicking over the commitment so someone else could reap the benefits 15 years later. And that's the problem with politics, is the priority of politicians when they're elected is the next election. And you saw that in spades when Trump was elected. From the moment he took office, he saw that Biden was a possible opponent. He was doing everything he could to undermine Biden as a political candidate. From the moment he was elected, the re-election was a critical thing.
Yeah, it is kind of mind-boggling. I mean, the idealist in me would like to think that most folks who get into politics, at least at the beginning, get in for the right reasons, and somewhere along the way, it gets. I mean, maybe Trump is a whole other conversation, but for the most part, where does that idealism go? I mean, is it really about power? Is it really about money? Is
Well,
it is
that's very, very interesting, because I've talked to a number of people in the Trudeau government and saying, I realize that you're hampered by what is politically possible. And so that really constrains you right away. But at the very least, tell us the truth about the dangers
oh
we face.
yeah, it's
Someone's
good.
got to do that. But the politics really constrain. I have met so many people when they were beginning their career, and they are idealistic, and they really, see the problems. But when you get in, all kinds of things happen. One thing is you have to subscribe to what the party decision is, and the party's decision or mandates are dictated by politics, and party unity is very important. One thing that does happen over time when people get reelected and become part of the cabinet or whatever, they get used to flying first class everywhere, and
Mm,
they have a car that's there, and they have all of the accoutrements of being an important person. And after a while they begin to think they deserve it. Like, yeah, I'm doing important work, and I deserve all of these frills that come with the office. And it kind of changes them. The Tommy Douglases of the world are pretty rare.
mm. Yeah, the forest becomes obscured by the trees. Yeah, it really is remarkable. I remember a local politician where we live said, if you ever decide to get into municipal at least. And we were having a coffee, and he looked out the window and he said, "You see those lights over there and that curb over there?" I did that. It was just kind of an interesting comment on
That's
actually.
very, that's a very, very good comment.
Yeah,
Uh,
just to roll up my sleeves, I was able to affect some change.
yeah, yeah. They're much more at the municipal level. That's where you're getting much more response, because the public is also there. I could call the mayor and see the mayor any time, and well, maybe not any time, but we can call the city councilors, and
Right.
that's where the action really is. I agree.
So
The
if we're
closest,
not
the closest I ever came, people have always said, "Well, if you are criticizing all the time, why did you run for office?"
right,
I'd be a terrible politician. I admire anyone that decides to devote a life to politics, but I came really, really close once when we got our first NDP government under Dave Barrett, and a guy I really admire, and I love Dave, and he came to me while he was in office and said, he told me, I want you to run in this riding. He told me who it was against. And so we went round and round, and finally I said, you know, Dave, I just am not. I don't think I could take the roughness of the political sphere, and no, I don't think I'm cut out for that. And then he said, "You goddamn academics, that's all you do. You talk a good line. You say we should do this and that." He said, "You see that road up the mountain there? I built that and
Nice.
saved that forest there. You see that building over there? I got it changed so that the rules of the energy use and all that are built into that. I did that. I built this and I did." And he was so right on. I just felt humiliated. And I came so close to running, but in the end, I realized I would have made a very poor politician because I wouldn't have been able to live under the restrictions of belonging to that party and having to not to open my mouth. You know,
Well,
that
David, would you agree that, I mean, politics kind of redefines change in a sense, right? A change,
yeah,
incrementalism is redefined, you know, because
exactly.
especially at a higher level.
Exactly. But you know, the Barrett government was very interesting because the word is, and I'm pretty sure it's true, that when they were elected, first NDP government under a Jew, it was a big deal, right? And so he called all of his members, and he jumped up and sat on the table, big table, and said, "Well, we're elected. Are we going to have fun, or are we going to play politics?"
Right.
And he decided
Nice.
that he was going to have fun. And what they did was unprecedented. They passed an average of 2 or 3 laws a week, and they transformed the country after all those
Hmm.
years of the Bennett Socred government. I mean, it was
Hmm.
his record really stands as a tribute. And I believe it was because he wanted to get things done and that reelection wasn't his highest priority.
Yeah, he actually passionately and intentionally committed to the
Yeah,
cause and was following through on it on all levels. Yeah, it
yeah,
is remarkable the ideological sort of. I find a lot of nonprofits. You know, the end goal becomes bigger and better, and the vision and the mission. I've worked in the nonprofit sector for about 20 years, and it's heartbreaking to see how it's all about the fundraising dollar,
yeah.
and so much gets set aside as a result of that. I loved, you know, in the film, you know, I think it was Ravine, and when you guys traveled to India, you're talking. She said something about, you know, protest isn't going to affect our government at all, and so she talks about her secret army,
Yes.
and she, it's so great. Trees, by the way, seem to be the theme for us here today in this interview, and she gets all the kids up in the trees, and she changes policy. Significant change in Delhi as a result of these children, and you've written 15 books for kids. Can you talk about that a little bit, about the seeds that are planted and how we raise our kids, and and is education really the silver bullet? You know,
It,
is
it
that does it?
is it is the key to it because I have said over and over again that as environmentalists, we fundamentally failed. You know, we stopped the dam at Site C on the Peace River in the 1970s. We, my wife and I got very involved with the Kayapo people in Brazil, and we stopped a major dam on the Xingu River by getting the World Bank to pull its loan to Brazil out. We stopped a proposal to drill for oil in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge that threatened the porcupine caribou herd. We celebrated these things as victories, but every one of these things is back on the agenda being
Mm-hmm.
done. And the reason is we didn't use those occasions, those battles, to change the way we see our relationship with the world.
Hmm.
Instead, it just became a brutal kind of which one, you know, has the most impact on the government or on the corporation at that time. But we didn't change the rules of what we're doing.
Right.
And the reason I wanted to influence children is to see that nature is everywhere, from the air that we breathe into our bodies and the water we drink, and you know that we are utterly dependent on the natural world. And
Hey,
that shift is very hard to
hmm.
get in adults. Kids see it right away. And I love to go to Toronto and talk to young people, kids in elementary school, because I say, when you turn on the tap, where does your water come from? They don't know. And I tell them at Lake Ontario. And then I say, when you flush the toilet, where does it go? They don't know. And I say, well, after treatment, it goes out into Lake Ontario. So then they begin to understand cycles. And,
Right.
you ask them, when you put the garbage on the curb, where does it go to? They don't know. Um, when you turn on the lights, where does the electricity come from? Right? Those are fundamental things that kids ought to think about, because as adults, we don't think much about them either.
No, it's at a point in the film, in this film Rebellion, you talk social media comes up about being the big difference, and about what, I guess, I mean, it's a real positive take on social media, and I guess, like, everything has an asset and a liability attached to it, right? And so
Yeah.
so if, and I love too, by the way, how you talked about, this movement was, what was the phrase you used? Nonviolent but dramatic. Right?
Yeah.
And again, we're sort of back to the narrative, and we're telling new stories. I've had the pleasure of interviewing quite a few Indigenous filmmakers at the Toronto Film Festival this year, and, well, actually over the past year or so, and Michelle Latimer and Sarah Todd, Monkey Beach, and the theme, of course, is very much about nature. It's about water. It's about breath.
Yeah.
About the air
Yeah.
that we breathe, and
Yeah.
but it's all being told through stories.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's a remarkable thing.
Yeah, our story now is dominated by the economy, which has
Mm,
become the most important thing. So we had a prime minister for 10 years, Stephen Harper, who said doing anything about climate change is crazy economics. It'll destroy the economy. And so his story, or his narrative, is the economy is the source of all the wonders, the good things in our lives. So more important than the atmosphere that gives us air to breathe, or weather,
right,
climate,
right.
and the seasons. That's a really dark narrative, if you ask me.
Was it David Attenborough who said that we've gone from a change? It's no longer climate change; it's climate crisis. Or was
No,
it someone
no.
else?
I think it may
Someone
have
else
been Gail. I can't remember.
might have been Gail. Well, I love how how you the filmmakers, whoever it was able to get the Church of England, or at least a representative of it, to
Yes.
call it the horse of the apocalypse, or one of the horsemen of the fifth. Is it the
Yes.
fifth horseman of the apocalypse? Yeah.
Yes, and the Pope has been very good on
Yep.
this too. Yeah,
No, it's pretty remarkable when it just seems like we've got everything we need to move into a more positive, hopeful space, and
well,
yet,
but the story that didn't come out that I regret is the actual record of the fossil fuel industry. This,
mm,
after all, climate change started in 1824. When Fourier discovered the greenhouse effect. So since 1824, scientists have been studying in the area of climatology.
right,
It's a robust science. By the 1960s, Mikhail Badiko, a Russian climatologist, said, if the warming continues like this, the ice in the Arctic is going to melt, and you won't get the reflection of light back. And that's going to accelerate the the global warming effect. He was right on. And in 1965, a man named Frank Eichard said burning coal, oil, and gas is causing the planet to warm up. And by the year 2000, it may very well be beyond
mm,
human control. This Frank Eichard was the president of the American Petroleum Institute, which is the
wow,
organization comparable to the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. So he represented the fossil fuel industry.
right.
1965, he said it's happening, and it's dire if we don't do something. In 1972, I think, James Black, the lead scientist for Exxon, said we're warming the planet by burning fossil fuels. So the industry knew it was happening and the dire consequences. And what did they do? They hired Many of the people, scientists who worked with the tobacco industry to deny that smoking causes cancer. Now they use the same techniques to say, no, 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 there is no evidence. Humans couldn't be causing it. This is a natural cycle. All, and Exxon spent tens of millions of dollars in a campaign to say, no, it's not proved, it's not real, it's not fossil fuels that are the basis. And it worked, all in the name of profit. So by 1992, the American Petroleum Institute that Frank Eichard spoke on behalf of, their official position of the API was, we don't know whether climate change is really happening, but if it is, there is no evidence that human beings are the cause.
Wow. Wow. Yeah,
So
it's just
that
astounding.
story, and yet at every table when we're discussing what we have to do, when we go to government or whoever, the fossil fuel industry is in there big time saying, if you screw us, we're going to lose jobs. Don't regulate us. We're doing the best we can. I mean, that story should be out there every
Oh,
time.
absolutely. It's not the story that you're reading most days, that's for sure. David, we got to wrap it up soon, and I knew this was going to happen. It feels like we just said hello. But can you maybe give me some insight on the Reverend Yearwood? Wonderful. Love his tone, loved his presence in the film. He seems really hopeful, you know.
Yeah.
Talking about, and yet talking about things like systemic racism and COVID and what it's revealed. And he sort of ends with, I think, a time to care for our brothers and sisters. I mean, it sounds so, idealistic. And I've often called myself a hopeful cynic. And, you know, because depending on the day you wake up and depending on the news you read, I think has an impact
Yeah.
on whether or not, you know, you feel like you can actually make a change, you know. Yeah, I don't know. Final word? Small
Well,
f. Do you have a footnote for us here?
My family has worked and lived with Indigenous people because I really believe they've got something so precious for the rest of us, you know, a way of seeing our relationship with nature.
Counter narrative.
We've got so much to learn from them, and so trying to help them gain control over their land and you know, restore their culture and their language have been high priorities for us. And what's astounding to me, you know, the Indigenous Lives Matter has come up because we saw Colden Boushie, who was murdered by a Saskatchewan farmer, and then in New Brunswick, more recently, the two people that were shot in their homes. Um, and yet we talk to Indigenous people and they always say, well, we're all in the same canoe and we have to be paddling together. And I go, how can
Right.
you do that? You know, how come you're not just a torrent of anger and hatred from the abuse that you've had to live through? But they still talk about coming together, and it's a very generous thing that they do.
I think it's a beautiful, beautiful way to end our conversation. That notion of good and beauty and truth and I mean, it's about a community. I love the notion of all being in the same canoe. I don't know how good I am at keeping it, you know, straight, but at the same time, I do love that sensibility and the generosity comment. I think
Exactly.
there's something really profound and beautiful. And well, listen, thank you for your generosity today and joining me here on this conversation. And what a pleasure, what an honor. And again, congratulations on this episode in particular, but 41 years, that's just remarkable. And what's new for you? Are you writing anything? You working on anything?
I'm doing a new podcast, 5-part podcast series, and
Amazing.
it's yeah. But
Well,
you know, I've got young grandchildren, and so they give me the energy to.
oh, that's cool. That's
You
great.
know, I have no illusion. I'm just one person, you know. But you know, I always say if there are enough drops, we can fill. We're drops in the bucket, but we can fill any bucket there is. So
Absolutely. The ripple effect has been profound, without a doubt. David, what a pleasure. We've been talking to David Suzuki today here, the host of The Nature of Things, and the newest episode coming out very soon called Rebellion. Thanks, David.
Thanks for having me.